So everybody's familiar with the concept of an elevator pitch, right? How do you tell your story about you personally, about your business, right? In the time it takes to go from 1 to 10 floors on an elevator, right? Who you are, what you do, and why you matter, right? These are some of the fundamental things. And then what you can do of value for the client or the customer are some of the fundamental things for an elevator pitch. And to your point of your question, most people think about that externally. Let's roll that back for a little bit and think about the world that we all live in. At work, when people are averaging in a corporate setting 100 emails a day, then your elevator pitch, you need to get really good at having powerful subject lines because you sending an email doesn't mean it was read. An email that you sent that was read doesn't mean it was acted upon. So the stronger you are at coining your messaging, your phrasing, and your ask in a way that describes what you need, the support, help, goals, guidance you need, but also what is the positive business impact for the person that you're writing to for them to help you. Because a lot of things inside a large organization, of which I'm getting a lot of experience with, one of my companies was sold to Workplace Options a few years ago. Workplace Options is a $150 million business. Workplace Options has just recently been sold to TELUS out of Canada, which is a $5 billion organization. So I was very fortunate, and one of the very senior leaders of TELUS was in Raleigh at our headquarters. And after he gave some initial talks about his vision for the business and different things, he opened it up for Q&A. And then we had kind of a social hour, right? Where people could just ask questions of the leaders that were present and just get to know each other a little bit better and ask some questions that maybe you wouldn't want to ask in front of, 200 people. The difference between me and so many others is I knew the list of executives that were coming. I understood how many people they would interact with in that day. And I said, wait a minute, what is the one thing I would want each of these executives to remember me by? What is the one point of influence I want for each one of the executives? And one of my new charters is I'm the co-chair of our Global Thought Leadership Council for our division that's called Employer Solutions. And so I went to our CEO, the top of the food chain, introduced myself, told him how we were acquired, and I said, I have under a minute with you. I said, I'd like to share one thing I think is really important to the business. I have under a minute with you, right? I acknowledge that I'm not the only person he's got to talk to. I'd like to share with you one thing that I believe could make our business more impactful. He said, yes. He leaned in. He was like, yes. And my phrase was, thought leadership is an underutilized sales acceleration tool. And then here's what he did. He said, tell me more. And so I talked to him about what I was doing with our thought leadership programming and how it wasn't just about writing expert white papers. It was about taking thought leadership content, building a content supply chain that drives higher level C-suite meetings for our sales force. And so in my 90 seconds, in my 120 seconds with him, I used the first 10 seconds to explain why he may want to listen to me. The second 30 to 40 seconds talking about what I was doing that I felt could impact the organization. And my only goal was to get this high-ranking leader to say, tell me more. And when I did tell me more, I said, well, there's other people waiting to talk to you. I'm going to stick with this one thought process. I told him my boss, Alan King, had recommended I work on this and that I'll be back in touch with more detail if this is something you'd like to keep up with. Yes, please do. Now, most people, because I have a sales DNA, a business development DNA, a pitching for money DNA, I have the ability to soundbite things I need to do in 120 seconds or less. I've developed that skill, but I also practiced it. I also thought it through. I also scripted it so that when I got my 2 minutes with this executive, I was on point. I was sharing something that was impactful to the global business, something relevant to his new role, and then who I was in helping that happen, right? And so I think the elevator pitch is not just an external thought process. It is a key element of communicating with anybody that you're trying to influence, anybody that you want to remember you, anybody that has the power and influence to move your project further. You don't need to give them the 37-page PowerPoint deck that you built in AI that you didn't review and has a lot of commoditized garbage jargon in it. You need to slow down and figure out what matters to your audience, tell them quickly, concisely, and how it benefits them. And that's how you win in the elevator pitch. That's how you sell through a tsunami that we're in right now in business. But even though I know it naturally, I still practiced, I rehearsed, I thought about it, because you never know when your 2 minutes is going to change the trajectory of your career. So I practice it every chance I can.